The most challenging thing on Pirates was Davy Jones.
We had motion capture trackers on him. We had all these silly dots on his face, but Bill Nighy was that character. And I think for me, that was the first time I really saw a direct transference of someone's performance onto a CG creature. And it was so complex and so layered. You've got all these tentacles. Trying to get them to operate like they really would is a major challenge, because in the computer, although you've got the shape of the tentacles, if they're going in different directions, they'll just penetrate right through each other. The idea that they would hit and react is just not in the computer. It has to be worked out, and it takes a lot of calculations to make something like that work.
It was just so incredibly detailed, and the work that, you know, the model builders and the texture painters and all the guys that contributed to that show in all the different ways of just bringing this immensely complicated crew and ship to life.
Technology changes very quickly and gets better and better, so it gives the artists at ILM and their supervisors more fun to play with, more things to play with, more toys, and it pushes the limits, which is exactly what we want to do.
We thrive on developing new techniques to achieve something that's never been done before, so imagination is unencumbered.
Inspired by the original 1953 version of War of the Worlds, Steven Spielberg teamed with ILM once again to push visual storytelling to a whole new level.
Well, I had this crazy idea one day when I was doing my storyboards. I had sketched out a 3-minute dialogue scene between the two kids and Tom Cruise in the car after they escaped New Jersey. I began sketching it in cuts, you know, and close-ups and profiles and over-shoulder shots, and then threw all that stuff out because that wasn't exciting enough. And I thought, well, there's got to be a way to do this. Maybe, what if I did this all in one shot? And then I had some of the previs guys come in, and I prevised the entire scene with a moving camera. That actually went through the car at one point, went through the back window at another point, went out into the middle of the turnpike to make room for cars that are passing, and then went back into the window again. And it was an impossible dream, and I knew it was not achievable, because I didn't quite know how to blend it. Where were the blend lines going to be? How do we glue these disparate pieces together to make it seem like it's one shot? So when I showed Dennis Muir in the previs, Dennis said, right away, and this time he didn't even have to think about it, he said, you can do it in 2 shots. I said, where's the break? He said, when you come back in through the car, through the back of the car. And then when you're pulling back out to the high crane shot at the end, the car moves off into the vanishing point. So Dennis thought that was going to be no problem.
I don't think there's much clue that you're seeing an effect in those things because there's no camera cuts. It's done much more like documentary style. And that's got a really great sense of surprise when that happens. And it's much more realistic and immediate. And that's hard to do with any kind of effect.
Every little thing as a collection of what we do in the history of all the films that we've done kind of goes into every movie that we're doing right now. Transformers represents a colossal collection of all these different stair steps of ideas on the way. By this point in time in computer graphics, we have learned how to do hard, shiny objects, yes, but have we really conquered how they're lit? Have we really conquered a more realistic style of animation? Or a cooler style, let's say? No. And we're constantly reassessing, what can we do better? Then we start designing the robots. And I think initially a lot of the robots were made out of all these questionable materials that look very CG-ish. And we actually started building a couple of robots out of like these bony fragments that look like, you know, what is it, alien space stuff. We don't know what it is. Michael Bay, our director, and myself, we kept going back and forth on this. We go, you know what, this is not working. Let's just go to car parts and just start drawing from real world, because you and I go to the movie and if we see something where we don't quite understand it, it looks fake. If you want it to look photoreal, well, what does that mean? It's got to look like people made it. And so that's why we gravitated all toward, you know, these designs that were more or less things that we know.
I think the transformation scenes from the first movie, you know, were something that people had never seen before. So there were about 10,000 moving parts. All those pieces have to move and articulate with one another. Technology-wise, that stuff didn't exist before. So again, you know, it puts ILM on the leading edge of technology breakthrough.
On Iron Man, we drew a lot from what they learned on Transformers. And that made me extremely comfortable with how ambitious to get with Iron Man. Because I've always been a bit of a skeptic about CGI. I think primarily because it hasn't been done right in many cases.
A challenge was, I think initially, to impress him with the idea that we could make the Iron Man suit look pretty seamless and realistic.
I love this suit!
The other issue was that there were some very beautiful practical suits created by what was then known as Stan Winston Studios. Robert, he was finding the suit very uncomfortable to wear, and so he would usually pull one or two pieces off just so that he had more freedom of his arm movements. It was clearly still constricting, so he pulled more and more pieces off, and in the end I said, look, let's pull it all off. I'm confident, based on what we've done, that we can replace the whole thing. And so we did. We pulled it all off, and I was putting the markers on Robert, and he's like, I love you, because it was so happy that he could just now act and emote, and we would just add it all digitally later.
At one point in the process, I was giving notes on a shot, saying how I didn't believe a certain reflection, it looked fake to me. And that's when Ben Snow, who was the ILM supervisor, said, that's the real suit. So I was giving notes on the real suit, thinking it was the CGI suit. And that's when I knew that it crossed that line. And from that moment on, I realized that technology was a good one. It had passed the point where I could tell the difference. And then it became about how best to design the shots to make full use of what it could do well, and not to ask of those shots or that technology what it wasn't good at. So I think a lot of times now when you see bad CGI, it's because of poor planning on behalf of the filmmaker, as opposed to the artists that are working on it. And that's a big leap, that's a big change. And so now I think it's incumbent upon the filmmakers to learn more about CGI, because it's a tool that's here to stay.
The suit is the star, of the Iron Man movies. When you watch that suit do stuff, that's what we go there for. When the screws come out and the boots come on and things come on his arm, you really wish you had one of those things. And the ability to make you want to be that particular character is the dream of, I'm sure, all the guys that are working in those particular places that sit there and go, oh, that would be so cool. What if his suit did this? And they make us want to be those characters. They make us want to see that stuff happen.
In 2009, director J.J. Abrams reinvigorated the original Star Trek universe through the help of ILM's illusionists, the first challenge being a new design for the Starship Enterprise.
The thing about the Enterprise was you can't really play with it too much because it's so iconic. And I just knew that we were dealing with those very vocal fans who were going to be pissed off no matter what we did. So I thought, well, let's just update it a little bit, but let's maintain its essential silhouette.
There's a certain level of pressure involved in that too, because I remember when we did the new Enterprise for the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, and the first image that was revealed to the public, it sounded like they were going to kill us if they could find us. And we were talking about an artist relocation program because we're like, oh my God, They got so upset. And then it came out and they loved it.
The amazing thing is ILM took these designs that were done and they made this thing live and breathe, and they brought this ship to life. Star Wars made it impossible to do anything new. There's not a weather system, a terrain, an environment, a character color, a number of arms or legs. There's nothing that he did everything. It's, and in the last 3 films, probably exponentially more than, all science fiction films put together. Every once in a while, someone would whisper, remember, Star Trek came before Star Wars. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't help me, because George has outdone it.
ILM made the most of practical and visual effects magic by shooting 2 very different worlds side by side. Just 30 feet apart in the parking lot of Dodger Stadium, creating Kirk stranded on the icy Delta Vega planet was done from a partial set under the balmy skies of Los Angeles.
It was a really fun magic trick to get to kind of shoot those things so closely and yet have them seem so worlds apart. There's a step with lighting and rendering that is just unnervingly magical. When you get it, you're like,
You can work on a shot for months, and you go and watch one of the movies you've worked on, and it's, you know, you see the audience react to something, you go, wow, you know, that's awesome. So it's very fulfilling from that aspect.
It just requires an incredible organizational and artistic endeavor, and I think that the fact that it works as well as it does is a testament to how ILM is built and the kind of people that work there. It's an amazing team, a huge, amazing team.
In 2005, ILM moved from Marin County across the Golden Gate Bridge to a 23-acre complex at the historic Presidio. Within this house that Star Wars built, ILM's team of visual effects wizards continue to push the envelope. From their humble beginnings in a Van Nuys warehouse to a state-of-the-art facility, they've single-handedly transformed the photochemical days of old into a new digital era, changing the industry one film at a time. Over the last 35 years, ILM has created visual effects in nearly 300 movies. Their innovations in artistry has been recognized with 15 Visual Effects Academy Awards, 23 additional nominations, and awarded the National Medal of Technology. In dark theaters everywhere, they transport us to other worlds with their cinema magic, always inspired to create the impossible.
I think ILM's greatest challenge is, in a way, their own reputation, you know, and continuing to grow and expand and, you know, and live up to the standards they've set.
This work is very complicated, it's very labor intensive, but it's to some extent become commoditized, and the expectation is that, you know, the more of this we're doing, we should be getting cheaper, cheaper, cheaper.
The competition from overseas especially has been really hard when the salaries are so much less than here. So how do we work faster and better and still keep the quality up? And we've had a lot of people who've gone through ILM, set up other companies around that are doing great work also, and to try to keep on top of it and come up with the next thing that's better than what someone else is doing.
ILM's body of work is something to be extremely proud of. I mean, you go back and look at all the things that ILM has done. It's the history of movies at the last part of the 20th century and into the 21st century.
Lightning just keeps striking at ILM. That's the remarkable thing about ILM. It's not like they had their moment and it's moved on. They find ways to reinvigorate that facility by breaking new ground.
I think ILM's biggest accomplishment isn't any one show. It's that they've managed to realize the dream that any filmmaker would have, which is the ability to do anything.
The ability to continue to make us believe what we see is the true genius of what these guys do.
George made his company available to every studio and to every filmmaker. And in a sense, it was the first time that had ever happened before, where a company was formed for all of us to be able to achieve our impossible dreams. And George made that possible for all of us.